A compassionate waiter comes to the aid of an unusual woman who has an accident in the bathroom, only to discover that she is the owner of a restaurant empire, leading to an unexpected romance between them. On a frigid winter evening, the cozy atmosphere within Joe's diner transformed the sounds of clinking cutlery and soft conversations into a source of solace. The wind roared outside, whipping through the trees and sending leaves dancing along the deserted sidewalks. Within the cozy confines, patrons savored steaming cups of coffee and indulgent burgers, thankful for the warmth of shelter. The door chimed gently as a woman entered the room. She donned a modest wool coat, a scarf casually wrapped around her neck, her posture rigid and taut, as though she were suppressing something within. Her complexion was ashen, droplets of perspiration beginning to gather at her temple. Even in the cool air, she scanned the area swiftly, her gaze flickering to the sign positioned above the restrooms. She went unnoticed, just another weary soul navigating the challenges of the day. She opened the restroom door, her hand quivering on the handle. Within the room, the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered as she made her way unsteadily to the sink. Her reflection in the mirror revealed a woman teetering on the brink of despair. Her lips started to take on a bluish hue. She grasped her chest and collapsed onto the floor, wheezing, fighting for air. Her sight became hazy. Her body shook violently as a piercing pain shot through her chest and back, an abrupt and overpowering feeling she knew all too intimately. Clara Bennett was nearing the end of her journey. A concealed and perilous heart condition, one she had managed to keep from almost everyone, had re-emerged, posing a grave threat to her life once more. She found herself in solitude, and this time, survival seemed uncertain. With a flicker of awareness, Clara extended a quivering hand toward the door. Her fingers grazed the icy tile as her voice faltered, barely rising above a whisper. "I would appreciate some assistance." The door creaked open just a sliver. A woman stepped inside, looked down and came to a standstill. Clara locked her gaze with hers. "I would greatly appreciate your assistance." The woman stepped back, clutching her handbag tightly. Apologies escaped her lips in a whisper. She believed another would arrive, and with that thought, she swiftly exited. A moment later, two girls entered, their lively conversation abruptly silenced at the sight of Clara sprawled on the floor. One murmured, "Do you believe she's pretending?" "I came across something similar on TikTok," another person responded. "Individuals feign unconsciousness, then steal from you as you approach." They departed in silence. In the diner, Daniel positioned himself at the beverage station, expertly pouring a refill for table 6. He caught snippets of the girls' conversation as they walked by. A figure lies sprawled on the bathroom floor. Likely a fraudulent scheme. Daniel scowled. There was an unsettling sensation in the air. He passed the coffee to a colleague and headed toward the restrooms, disregarding the wary looks from those around him. "Sir, that belongs to the women," a customer shouted after him, yet Daniel continued on his way without pausing. He swung the door open and momentarily halted as his gaze landed on her. A woman sprawled on the floor, her lips tinged with blue, her eyes barely fluttering open. "Excuse me, can you hear me, please?" he inquired, lowering himself next to her. She blinked languidly, her hand quivering as it reached out to him. "My chest is in pain." Daniel acted without a moment's pause. He softly assessed her pulse. It was subtle, uneven. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, and her skin felt icy against the fingertips. His training from a first aid course long ago resurfaced. He gently placed her on the floor, took off his jacket, and draped it over her. "It's going to be all right," he murmured, as he reached for his phone to call for help. "Remain by my side. Assistance is coming soon." He communicated swiftly and articulately with the dispatcher, providing the address while detailing her symptoms and overall condition. The operator verified that the ambulance was on its way. While he waited, he remained by her side, counting her breaths and speaking softly to keep her aware. "May I ask what your name is?" he inquired, despite her inability to respond. Her fingers gripped his sleeve with a subtle intensity. "That's great. Remain by my side." The wail of sirens intensified. Daniel listened as the doors swung open, and the paramedics hurried inside. He stood, beckoning them closer. He shouted from within. They rushed in, quickly evaluating her state. One murmured about a potential thoracic aortic dissection. It is essential that we ensure stability and facilitate transportation. As they carefully lifted Clara onto the stretcher, Daniel observed, his heart racing with anxiety. He was completely unaware of her identity. He had no idea that the woman he had just rescued was among the richest restaurant proprietors in the nation. To him, she was merely an individual in need of assistance when no one else was willing to offer it. As the medics wheeled her out, Clara cast a final glance at him, her eyes heavy with fatigue. She parted her lips, attempting to articulate her thoughts. A sound emerged, raspy and fragmented. Daniel extended his hand and softly grasped hers. "It's all right," he murmured gently. "Everything will turn out fine." Without a moment's pause, he trailed the ambulance into the darkness of the night. The hospital room lay in silence, softly illuminated by the gentle light of the monitors. The steady beeping of the heart monitor marked the solitary soundtrack to Clara Bennett's gradual awakening. Her eyelids fluttered open, the ceiling swirling momentarily before coming to a halt. She existed, but only in the faintest sense. Clara had spent her whole adult life in constant movement. Quick choices, swifter gatherings, and a realm that required every ounce of her dedication. As the leader of the Hearth, one of the fastest-growing restaurant chains in the nation, Clara was celebrated as a visionary, a woman who crafted a culinary empire not through wealth, but through empathy. That was the narrative at the very least. In reality, the burden of her role had never felt more substantial. Only 6 months prior, she had unearthed a betrayal from someone she held in high regard, her second-in-command, a man she had nurtured from the very beginning. He had been tampering with vendor contracts, diverting funds, and orchestrating a hostile takeover. Even more troubling, he had forged connections within her own board, employing charisma and subtle assurances of progress to divert backing from her. It was more than mere betrayal. It was a profound sorrow. She devoted years to creating a company that was designed to embody the essence of family. And now that family had transformed into a war zone. Following months of legal struggles, negotiations, and close calls, Clara had momentarily stepped back from the daily operations. Outwardly, it was presented as a break from routine. In solitude, it was a matter of endurance. During her time away, Clara decided to adopt a low profile. Without makeup, without assistance, without name tags or titles. She explored quaint diners, charming roadside cafes, family-owned shops, anywhere that offered food infused with a personal touch, rather than corporate sheen. She longed to recall the sensation of being on the opposite side of the table, to discover whether kindness still thrived in the untamed, unrefined corners of the world. She was taken by surprise when she found herself crumpled on the floor of a bathroom stall in a rundown diner. She never anticipated that the sole individual willing to assist her would be a young waiter, clad in a tattered apron, with steady hands and eyes that radiated understanding. Just a single worry. Daniel. Though she hadn't learned his name, his face lingered in her memory. He refrained from inquiring. He did not waver. In a realm steeped in skepticism and exchange, he had moved solely on instinct. Not for acknowledgement, without expectation of gain. Simply due to the fact that assistance was required. The memory, blurred yet vivid, lingered with her still, even as she rested in the hospital bed. She was unaware of the duration of his stay following the arrival of the ambulance. She was uncertain whether he had even inquired about her name. Yet, she was acutely aware of the lingering emotion he had imparted. As if a portal had been swung wide, allowing invigorating breezes to sweep through a space that had languished in stillness for far too long. After an extended period, Clara experienced an unexpected sensation. Expectation. A gentle rap on the door interrupted her reverie. A caregiver entered, her smile warm and reassuring. "Seems you have opened your eyes to the world. That's a positive indication." Clara gave a slow, deliberate nod. "What is the duration?" You remained unresponsive for several hours upon your arrival. A thoracic aortic aneurysm occurred, probably induced by stress. Fortune smiled upon you when he discovered you at that moment. Clara's voice carried a rough edge. The server. He followed the ambulance, waited until we stabilized you, then left quietly. No last name was provided. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Clara took a deep breath. He had no idea who I was. The nurse inclined her head. Perhaps that explains his willingness to assist. Once more in solitude, Clara fixed her gaze on the ceiling, lost in thought. In her realm, each person possessed a perspective. Each movement bore its own cost. Even kindness came with agreements. Yet, in just an instant, this young man had shown her the truth of her misconceptions. Just a single breath. Just a single heartbeat. A single, spontaneous display of bravery. Clara Bennett, the CEO, was not saved by him. He saved a woman on the floor. An unfamiliar face. In that moment, he had unwittingly restored to her the one thing she believed was gone for good. Belief. 3 weeks after her release from the hospital, Clara found herself standing across the street from the very diner where it all had fallen apart. The wool coat had vanished, along with the weariness that had lingered in her gaze that evening. In its stead lay a pair of jeans, a faded hoodie, and hair gathered into a relaxed ponytail. She bore no resemblance to the CEO featured on magazine covers. That was deliberate. Today she arrived as an unknown presence. She bided her time until the lunch rush commenced before quietly entering. The location appeared just as it always had. The walls have a subtle, worn appearance. Half-full ketchup bottles. Vinyl booths show signs of wear, with cracks appearing at the edges. And yet something about it now seemed to radiate warmth. Recognizable. At that moment, her gaze fell upon him. Daniel. He meticulously cleaned the surface of the table. Sleeves rolled up, ready for action. His brow knitted in focus as he meticulously arranged the salt and pepper shakers with precision. He remained the same, continuing to progress with understated effectiveness. Continuing to share gentle smiles with familiar faces who called out to him personally. He failed to identify her. That was absolutely flawless. Clara settled into the back booth, near the window. She lingered, hoping he would finally see her. As he drew near, he carried with him the same serene presence that had enveloped him the night he had rescued her. "Greetings," he remarked. "You're in the prime spot to enjoy everything unfolding before you." A serene view through the window, distant from the clamor of the kitchen. Clara beamed. "It seems you have experience with this." He smiled broadly. On several occasions, he presented her with a menu. "Inform me when you are prepared." She nodded, her gaze following him as he moved away to another table. Upon his return to take her order, she opted for something uncomplicated. Toasted cheese sandwich paired with a warm bowl of tomato bisque. He blinked slowly, as if awakening from a deep reverie. "Excellent decision. That's the one aspect that always meets our expectations. It sounds like you've sampled every dish available." He responded with a sigh. "Too many late shifts. Eventually, you cease to indulge in flavors and begin to consume solely for the sake of existence." That brought a smile to her face. They communicated in quick, fragmented exchanges. Nothing profound. "It's not about you." Yet there was an element in his demeanor, genuine and unpretentious, that compelled her to inquire further. As he presented her with the meal, she inhaled deeply. "So what's the tale you have to share?" He arched an eyebrow. "That's typically my role," she indicated with a wave of her hand. Few individuals remain in positions like this without a compelling motive. Daniel nonchalantly settled into the booth opposite her, making himself comfortable without a word of permission. "That seems reasonable. I spent my childhood in a nearby town, cared for my mom until her final moments, received a scholarship for culinary school, but had to withdraw when the funds were depleted. I have been engaged in work since then." Clara inclined her head. "So, you had aspirations of becoming a chef?" He murmured softly, "I still do. However, pursuing dreams requires financial investment. The expense of renting has increased. She gazed at him, perceiving the depths hidden beneath the uniform, the serene mind, the wit, the truthfulness. She felt a growing curiosity to uncover more. Have you considered giving it another shot? He shook his head in disbelief. It's not in the plans at the moment. I earn a fair amount in gratuities. I enjoy the company of others. It seems I remain connected to the kitchen, even when I'm not the one cooking. His voice carried no trace of bitterness, only acceptance. That was what resonated with her the most. Here stood a man who had quietly rescued her life, without any show or celebration. A man who once harbored grand aspirations, missed his opportunity, yet remained gracious all the same. She extended her hand toward the coffee, then hesitated. Do you enjoy a cup of coffee after work? Daniel's eyes fluttered open. Times. Good, she said, rising to her feet. After your shift, you're joining me, my treat. He chuckled, a gentle, unexpected noise. Is it really that simple? Just like that? Do you often express yourself so directly? Exclusively with those who have earned it. As his shift wrapped up an hour later, they strolled over to the quaint cafe just around the corner. They settled towards the rear, mugs cradled in their hands, the dialogue flowing more freely now. Conversations flowed about literature and cuisine. It's the type of music that resonates deeply when you're on the road by yourself. They remained silent about their identities and the things they had left behind. For 2 hours, they existed as two souls exchanging warmth. For the first time in ages, Clara felt a sense of freedom, no longer burdened by the need to conceal or validate herself. The following weeks drifted by in a serene revelation. Clara frequented the diner often. Not every day, but frequently enough that Daniel would begin her coffee without needing to be asked. They shared more laughter, savoring their conversations for a longer time. He remained unaware of her identity, and she continued to keep it a secret from him. Clara never intended for it to stretch out like this. Initially, her sole desire was to catch a glimpse of the man who had rescued her existence. Then she felt the urge to express her gratitude to him. In that moment, her desire was just to be near him. As the day drew to a close, Daniel accompanied her to the corner. Under the soft illumination of the vintage street lamp, they exhaled, their breath forming delicate wisps in the chilly night air. He remarked that you stand out. She arched an eyebrow. That could be interpreted as either praise or a caution. He smiled, conveying his meaning in a positive light. You pay attention. Truly pay attention. Many individuals speak merely for the sake of hearing their own voices. Clara averted her gaze. Perhaps I've reached my limit with the clamor. For whatever reason, he murmured gently. It's wonderful to have you here. She parted her lips to express a thought, a genuine thought. Yet, the tranquility was shattered by a voice emanating from the other side of the street. Is that you, Clara? She pivoted without hesitation. A tall figure in a finely crafted coat lingered by the curb, gazing at her with a look of undeniable familiarity. Did his voice resonate? Clara Bennett? From the fireplace. Goodness, I nearly didn't recognize you. Daniel stood still. Clara's expression was serene, yet her quietude spoke volumes. The figure drew near. I was previously employed in your marketing division. During the initial phase of growth, I was surprised to find you here. Daniel's breath hitched. Thoughts surged through his mind. Is it Clara Bennett? The fireplace? The name struck him like a splash of icy water. He retreated gradually, his gaze sharpening. Is it Clara Bennett? He murmured again, his voice softer this time. She gazed at him then, completely truthfully. Indeed? Daniel's eyelids fluttered momentarily. You're in charge? The one featured in all those profiles? The Culinary Kingdom? I was indeed. His face contorted, not with rage, but with bewilderment, pain blossoming beneath the surface. So all this time you were aware of my identity. You were aware that I was unfamiliar with you. So, you want me to just share my unfulfilled aspirations? Are my issues with rent? So, you simply remained in that spot? It wasn't that way, she murmured gently. So what exactly was it? He inquired, retreating another step. Is this a form of social experimentation? Were you putting me to the test? Wondering if my approach would change if I were unaware? Negative. You might have mentioned it to me. She conceded that I could have. Yet I refrained, for I appreciated the way you perceived me. That I perceived you as ordinary? That you noticed me at all? Daniel let out a brief, sharp laugh, tinged with bitterness. All this while, I believed I was connecting with someone who truly grasped my essence. It seems I was merely a narrative waiting for your pen to bring me to life. Clara's voice trembled, yet she composed herself. Daniel, when you discovered me on that bathroom floor, I wasn't in a position of leadership. I was nothing more than a frightened, shattered soul who feared she would face her end in solitude. He averted his gaze. You were unaware of my name, yet you offered your assistance regardless. That is the reason for my return. You brought me back to the essence of my true self, before the chaos took over. He remained silent. I never intended to mislead you, she went on. However, I also didn't want to become the version of myself that others perceive as a mere product. The quiet lingered in the air between them. At last, she spoke softly. Your act of saving me transcended my past identity. However, now that you are aware, it indeed does. And that's what causes the deepest pain. Daniel let out a breath. I'm at a loss for words. No need to speak. She retreated, her voice scarcely rising above a murmur. But I hope someday you'll recall the girl who simply sought coffee and conversation, not the identity behind countless menus. With that, she pivoted and strode away, leaving Daniel solitary beneath the street lamp, his heart whirling between pride and anguish. Daniel failed to show up for work the following morning, and the one after that as well. As the week drew to a close, his name had subtly vanished from the staff schedule. There was no goodbye, no words left behind, only an emptiness where his presence once filled the air. He exited the diner with the same quiet grace that had accompanied his entrance into the restroom, where he had come to the aid of a stranger. Clara came back twice more, ordering coffee she hardly touched, settling into the same booth by the window where they had once shared conversations about soup and new beginnings. Yet Daniel never crossed the threshold again. The pain was greater than she had anticipated. It wasn't due to his dismissal of her identity. She had become accustomed to that. Not due to a sense of guilt, although a fragment of her did. Yet, for the first time in years, she had glimpsed something genuine in another individual. In that brief instant, she experienced the sensation of being truly acknowledged. Yet, Daniel's silence stemmed not from arrogance. It stemmed from fear. Upon the revelation, he arrived home that evening, a tightness coiling within him. He revisited each dialogue they exchanged, every moment of laughter, every heartfelt confession he had shared, believing she mirrored his own journey, just another spirit traversing the fringes of existence. Yet, she was Clara Bennett. Clara Bennett. Individuals of her caliber boasted PR teams, corporate attorneys, and reputations so refined they could gleam through any controversy. Individuals such as him possessed nothing, only roughened hands, faded aspirations, and a tendency to toil until late. He found it unbearable to entertain the idea that anyone might believe he remained near her due to her identity. Each act of kindness, every exchange of words, felt like a hidden effort to obtain something in return. Even more troubling, he worried that Clara might believe that as well. And then he disappeared. Silence reigns, with no calls, no letters, and no farewells. Clara chose not to pursue him. She had the desire to. Every fiber of her being urged her to appear at his apartment, to insist he meet her gaze and express whatever was on his mind. Yet she chose not to. She realized that trust was not established through elaborate displays. It was crafted through subtle decisions, in stillness, in the act of releasing when it pained. Instead, she composed a letter, not a text. This is not an email. A genuine letter. Words flowing onto the page. Drawn in on 2 occasions and accompanied by the warm, gracious hostess at the diner. The letter bore no recipient's name, yet they were both aware of the intended recipient. Dear reader, I never shared the reason for my presence at the diner that night. I had no intention of eavesdropping or putting on a facade. Fatigue had settled in, weary of those who addressed my position rather than my essence. Exhausted from the facade of being fine when I truly wasn't. Exhausted from creating a realm where faces beamed in my direction, yet none truly understood me. Then I fell to the ground. And you, of all individuals, you knelt beside me. You were unaware of my identity. You didn't inquire about what I could provide for you. You have provided assistance. You rescued me. It extends beyond my own existence. My belief. Upon my return, I had no intention of becoming immersed in your realm. Yet, the world you created felt undeniably vivid, utterly sincere. Your presence brought laughter back to me when I had forgotten how to find it. You absorbed the words without taking action. Your words flowed freely, unencumbered by ulterior motives. And when you departed, I held no resentment. I truly wish I could share this with you. You were never insignificant, not even for a moment. Your value was never dependent on my name. You possessed it well before I arrived. The reality is this. Should you ever find yourself wanting to create something tangible, not a business or a profession, but something genuine, with sincerity, I will remain present, grasping the design plan. I have faith in the journey we've embarked upon. I have faith in you. See. A week later, Daniel finally opened the letter and began to read. Perched on the steps outside his apartment, the urban landscape thrummed with life around him. Yet his universe remained still. The sheet quivered gently in his grasp. It was not a request. It was not remorse. It was request to cease running. To cease the self-punishment for having faith that someone might recognize his worth even in the absence of a validating title. He carefully folded the letter, clutched it tightly against him for a brief moment, and gazed upward at the heavens. For the first time in days, he permitted himself to experience what had been hidden beneath the uncertainty. He felt her absence keenly, not due to her position as Clara Bennett, CEO, but simply because she was Clara. A woman sipped her coffee, only to find it scalding hot, who engaged with her entire expression, who once claimed to craft the finest grilled cheese in the area. Perhaps, just perhaps, her faith in him was strong enough to carry them both. The letter lingered in Daniel's coat pocket for 3 days. He perused it once while seated on the front steps of his building. Once more at the stroke of midnight, a half-empty beer resting beside him. For the third time, he found himself in the quiet of the diner that was no longer his workplace. Perched in solitude at the booth by the window. With every encounter, the words resonate more profoundly. She had not pleaded. She had not cast blame. She had merely trusted. In that moment, she had stripped away the veil of shame he had cloaked himself in for years. Daniel had devoted far too much of his life believing that a title was necessary to prove his value. That in the absence of credentials, wealth, or a prestigious surname to pave the way, all he could present to the world was his unwavering effort. And even that always felt insufficient. However, Clara's letter conveyed a different message. She had witnessed him in his most mundane moments. No curriculum vitae, there is no plan, and still crafted him a blueprint for something tangible. On a brisk Saturday morning, Daniel rose from his slumber, donned his freshest shirt, and hopped onto the bus destined to traverse the city. The location lacked elegance. A transformed warehouse nestled in a serene neighborhood, where the streets were adorned with vibrant murals and a sense of hope lingered in the air. The exterior of the structure featured a meticulously hand-painted sign. The Hearth Kitchen. Arrive with an appetite. Depart entirely. He entered the room. The scent struck immediately. Freshly baked bread. Gently cooking garlic. There's something simmering in the background. Then arrived the whispers. Joyful sounds of mirth. The sound of clanging cookware. At the heart of it all, Clara. She positioned herself behind a metal counter. Hair gathered casually in a relaxed bun. Flour-dusted apron. She demonstrated to a teenage boy the art of chopping an onion skillfully, ensuring he wouldn't shed a tear in the process. Her eyes glimmered with enthusiasm as she urged him on. giving his elbow a soft nudge. Initially, she overlooked Daniel. He stood there, observing her in her domain, less a leader, more a guide. In an instant, all his doubts dissolved as effortlessly as butter on a sizzling skillet. Clara finally turned, as if she could feel his presence, much like one does when something significant enters the space. As their gazes locked, she stood still. The world came to a standstill, unnoticed by anyone else. Daniel ambled deliberately toward the counter. His hands remained unwavering. His heart, however, was not quite the same. As he approached her, his gaze fell upon the cutting board. He picked up the spare knife resting beside it, cradling it with care. "I believe," he stated, his gaze both inviting and composed. "Let's begin with some chicken soup." In that fleeting instant, silence enveloped them both. Then Clara beamed. Gentle, authentic, perhaps slightly blurred at the boundaries. "That's the perfect place to begin," she murmured. He moved closer to her, pushing up his sleeves with a deliberate gesture. "Are you still guiding others in the kitchen, even when they act like they have it all figured out?" "Only the resolute ones," she remarked. He let out a soft laugh, placing the knife next to a carrot. "Flawless. I excel academically, yet my habits leave much to be desired." She inched a bit nearer. "We will address that issue." The letter remained unspoken between them. They didn't revisit what had shattered them. That can wait for another moment. At this moment, there were carrots to chop, broth to let bubble, and little ones to nourish. While they prepared the meal side by side, Clara cast a fleeting look his way. Concentrated, meticulous, his hands unwavering and his gaze serene. She was unaware of how deeply she longed for the sound of his voice. He effortlessly filled the silence, creating a sense of ease without any pressure. The kitchen hummed with activity, yet within the small square of space they occupied, shoulder to shoulder, everything seemed uncomplicated once more. They filled mismatched bowls with soup, handed bread along the table, and as the last child settled in with a spoon, Clara glanced at Daniel. He met her gaze with a calm intensity, and this time, the question lingered unspoken between them. He was present. He decided to remain, not for the glory, not for the recognition, but for the table they would create side by side. One meal, one moment, one intertwined existence at a time. The sign outside was crafted by hand, with all its imperfections adding to its charm and allure. Second spoon. Below it, in smaller letters, "Everyone deserves a second serving and a second opportunity." Clara and Daniel stood together, observing the last brushstroke dry, the morning sun casting a warm glow on the pavement outside their quaint, newly renovated restaurant. It existed independently, free from any connections. It lacked the support of investors and was not promoted through an extravagant campaign. It belonged to them, a creation forged from deep conversations over steaming cups of coffee and soft aspirations shared amidst the rhythm of chopping vegetables. After months of meticulous planning, every detail was carefully considered. The setting was a once-neglected cafe, tucked away in a long-forgotten part of the city. Now it had transformed into something completely different. A sanctuary of optimism, of belonging, of restoration. Within, the walls exuded a warm hue, adorned with creations crafted by the staff. The tables were inconsistent. The silverware found its way to new homes, yet each table remained graced by a flickering candle and the warmth of a welcoming smile. Clara managed the logistics, established connections, and conducted outreach. She possessed the skills to secure funding, negotiate rent, and ensure the numbers aligned perfectly. Yet beyond that, she possessed the remarkable ability to make individuals feel valued, even those who had long since lost touch with that sensation. Daniel was the soul of the kitchen. He managed it with a subtle command that garnered admiration without the need for loudness. He guided each newcomer in the art of crafting soup from the ground up, demonstrating the proper way to wield a knife, and emphasizing the importance of seasoning with precision. He regarded his staff as learners, not underlings. Their team defied convention. Theo stood in the kitchen, a teenager who had recently transitioned out of foster care, humming softly to himself as he prepared vegetables, the melodies of old jazz filling the air around him. Maria, a dedicated mother of two, faced years of job rejections due to a non-violent conviction. Louis, a former professional baker, faced a life-altering challenge when a car accident resulted in him having only one functioning hand. In this place, your history remains unexamined. They merely inquired about your preference for eggs. Every employee donned an apron featuring their name, meticulously stitched by hand, accompanied by a second word of their personal selection beneath it. Visionary, warrior, restorer. Daniel immersed himself in the pages. Faithful. The eatery welcomed patrons 5 days a week, inviting all who entered its doors. Contribute what you can. And if you were unable to, you still consumed it regardless. At the conclusion of each shift, the team gathered around the expansive table close to the kitchen to enjoy a meal together. It was more than mere employment. It was a unit bound by love. Amidst the morning rituals and the late-night cleanup, in the contrast of charred bread and flawless risotto, affection subtly settled into the gaps that lay between. It was never elaborate or theatrical. It revealed itself in subtle nuances. Clara would offer Daniel his favorite tea whenever she noticed the weary droop in his shoulders. He prepared her lunch and tucked a handwritten note into the napkin, featuring a sentimental line from the films she adored in secret. At times, they found themselves in heated discussions over scheduling, portion sizes, and the rightful place of sweet potatoes in soup. Yet, amidst the chaos, laughter echoed at the conclusion of the struggle. A kiss shared amidst the dance of flavors and aromas. As the final customer departed and the kitchen lights faded to a soft glow, Clara found herself leaning against the counter, observing Daniel as he methodically mopped the floor. He whistled, a melody she had grown fond of, while his sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms lightly dusted with flour. "You know," she said, "this wasn't the life I envisioned." He glanced upward with a sly grin. "Neither did I," she smiled. "Yet it feels improved in some way." He set the mop aside, approached her, and enveloped her in his embrace. He spoke gently, reflecting on the fact that it was created by our own hands, using the resources we had available. She inclined her head, resting her cheek against his chest. "And who we truly are." In that moment, enveloped by the aroma of freshly baked bread and the gentle hum of the refrigerator, Clara and Daniel transcended their roles as CEO and chef. They were not individuals shaped by betrayal or adversity. They were two individuals who had selected one another. In that act, something was born that nourished more than mere appetite. It nourished optimism. One spoonful at a time. 3 years later, the name Second Spoon carried a significance far beyond what Clara or Daniel had ever envisioned. 7 locations now spanned 5 states, each distinct, yet all resonating with the same purpose: to provide meals with dignity and to employ with compassion. They lacked franchising agreements, a marketing team, and online influencers to propel them into the spotlight. And still, individuals arrived. Not due to instruction, but because the world softly beckoned. There exists a realm where you will be nourished, acknowledged, and embraced. Indeed, it is genuine. Each spoonful was handled by an individual whose existence had previously gone unnoticed. Once a dishwasher, now a general manager. A young person who has left home is now crafting the seasonal menu. A former homeless grandmother now guides morning prayer circles before the doors open. The eateries did more than satisfy hunger. They nurtured aspirations. At the center of everything were Clara and Daniel. They always remained close, never confined to a distant office. They moved between the locations, filled in on the line during staff shortages, and took on night shifts when someone required a respite. Clara orchestrated the figures, the fundraising efforts, and the overarching vision. Daniel maintained the integrity of the flavors, uplifted the team, and ensured the stoves were perpetually heated. On a tranquil evening, once the final dish was scrubbed clean and the lights softened in the original Second Spoon, a small assembly convened in the kitchen. It was devoid of any embellishments, silent and still. A lengthy wooden table, lightly coated in flour, surrounded by flickering candles in glass jars, and a small group of individuals who had grown to feel like family. The day belonged to Clara and Daniel as they celebrated their wedding. She donned a modest linen dress. He donned a crisp white shirt with sleeves casually rolled up, complemented by a sleek black apron, the one featuring the word believer intricately woven into it. The ceremony was succinct. Theo, the inaugural teenager they employed, presided over the event with a printed script and trembling hands. Maria recited a poem she had crafted the previous night. With a single capable hand, Louis coaxed a gentle tune from the worn keys of an aged keyboard. As the moment arrived to exchange vows, Clara surveyed the well-known walls, the very kitchen where she had once crumpled, isolated, fearful, and unrecognized. Now illuminated by warmth, filled with joy and the presence of the man who had knelt beside her and assured her, "You'll be okay." She extended her hand toward Daniel and whispered gently, "You rescued me 2 times, first with your hands and then with your heart. This place, these people, this life. It's the fulfillment of a longing I never realized I had." Daniel, with a glimmer of emotion in his eyes, responded softly, "You provided me a table when I believed I had no place to belong. I will engage in discussions about every table with you for eternity." As their lips met, the kitchen burst into cheers, the clanging of utensils ringing out more vibrantly than the loudest of bells. A fresh wooden sign had been affixed above the restaurant's entrance earlier that morning. It stated, "This is not a dining establishment. I appreciate your kindness." 1 year later, the sun had dipped below the horizon, marking the end of yet another lengthy day filled with chopping, stirring, laughter, and life. In their cozy apartment above the bustling restaurant, Clara, Daniel, and a young girl named Joy gathered around a simple dinner table. Joy, adorned with gentle curls and inquisitive eyes, had entered their foster care a year prior. At this moment, she belonged to them, completely, eternally, and with every ounce of her being. With a wooden spoon in hand, she stirred her bowl of soup with pride, exclaiming, "I made this." Daniel playfully tousled her hair, declaring it the best soup he'd ever tasted. Clara offered him a piece of bread, their fingers lightly grazing each other. Their gazes intertwined, silent yet filled with the comfort of a love that had blossomed through the years. Deeper than any surface, there were no lenses, no news stories, just a shared meal, a gathering of loved ones, and a warmth that required no words, for some narratives exist beyond the glare of attention. Their evening concludes with dinner, only to resume anew the following day. At times, the most profound love tales emerge not from ideal pairings, but from a humble gesture of compassion. Daniel never sought acknowledgement. Clara had never anticipated being rescued. Yet, in unison, they crafted something beyond a mere dining establishment. They created a sanctuary, a testament to the existence of kind souls, comforting dishes, and opportunities for redemption. If this narrative resonated with you, if it brought to mind the idea that healing can emerge from the most surprising sources, consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories for additional authentic and heartfelt accounts that celebrate the unsung heroes, the small moments, and the love that blossoms from them. Sometimes it only requires a single spoon and a heart willing to remain. Thank you for tuning in. Until we meet again, remain compassionate and hold on to your faith.